In live for the Canthal Group, Rachel Lee and Darren Canthal. And today we are going to be talking about implicit and explicit agreements. Okay, so before we get started, we're going to talk a little about what we do and why this is important. So the Canthal Group provides executive coaching. And one of the things that we recognize within executive coaching and leadership development is communication. And what is typically some of the causes of miscommunication and what that looks like, how it feels, how it may affect the organization, and some tools that you can implement to start working on it, right? Start mitigating it. So Darren Canthal, being our mighty CEO and leader here, is known for his communication, helping clients understand and shore up their communication. But before we dive into that, you're also known for really bad dad jokes. So if you only stay for one thing, stay for the dad joke. So take it, Darren. What do you got for us today?
All right. Last week you didn't get it until like 2 hours later.
I know. So don't make them so complicated for my...
Well, there's only so many dad jokes out there.
We'll make them easier.
This one's okay. All right. So I went to McDonald's today and ate a kid's meal. It was good, but his mom was furious.
You told me that one. I don't think that is that funny.
Well, I needed to tell it. It was in my task here for the last, 4 weeks. So there's the McDonald's joke.
All right. Well, we put a really good, I thought the one that you put in today's newsletter, I thought that was really good too. That was crafty.
That was the one I told you last time that you didn't get.
Oh. See, I just need a few iterations or a few.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, which, by the way, if you have not signed up for our newsletter, make sure to drop us a line and we'll get you on that. If anything, again, it's just for the dad jokes. So, okay, let's dive into implicit and explicit agreements. So this is something, Darren and I are partners in life and in business, which can get tricky. It can get sticky. It's a totally different dynamic with a personal relationship and then a business relationship. And so we have had to work very hard on making sure that our relationship, our personal relationship, is protected and sanctity. What's the word I'm looking for? Sacred place, and doesn't get. We don't compromise our personal relationship. We had to work really, really hard at this. And one of the tools that we were taught was making sure that we are being very clear in our communication, our expectations, our agreements, and then making sure that the other person is in full understanding. So what does that mean exactly? Okay, so I want to read to you the definition of implicit and explicit, if my internet will open up. So implicit is implied, though not plainly expressed. Explicit, stated clearly and in detail, leaving no room for confusion or doubt. And I think that is super important, is the no room for confusion or doubt, because that's where you and I would get in trouble sometimes. And then it would lead to fighting, frustration, like this, right? Like, what do you hear? What's going on in that brain? I think you even said, like, what is going on in that brain? What did you hear? Where are you? And my brain was over here and is creating this whole story, and you're over here and you're like, that makes no sense, right? And it creates this feeling of like, well, plenty of times, like completely pissed off, right? But it creates separation. And at the end of the day, we're on the same team. And we recognize that and we're trying to move towards that, but how we had to shore it up. And then we thought, well, this is also what we're coaching on. This is also super important in leadership. So why don't you dive in and talk a little bit about your experience, right? Because you're the one who brought it to our relationship. And it was a game changer. So why don't you share your experience with implicit and explicit?
Okay. So it's probably important to note that we were only introduced to it recently, like the last 3 or 6 months. In our work as executive coaches, there were a lot of times where a client would come and say something like, I don't know if I'm a good leader. I don't know if my boss thinks I'm doing a good job. I don't know if I'm meeting expectations, or some sort of self-doubt. And my first question to them is, did you ask? And often the answer was no. So that was like the first inclination that we didn't have these explicit discussions or explicit agreements or anything. Like our brain implied that I'm not good enough, I'm not leading well, my team is not satisfied, my boss isn't satisfied, or something. So that was the first thing. The second thing, more recently, is the way I describe the explicit versus implicit is to speak the unspoken. There are a lot of unspoken rules in corporate America, in personal relationships, in the world, in sports, fill in the blank. And the more implicit we have, so the more unspoken, and speaking about the two of us to make it more personal, is there's a lot of times that you have a unspoken expectation of me and I have them of you. Neither of us know the expectation is there. We don't meet the expectation, and now all of a sudden we're disappointed in one another.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, and also for a lot of leaders that we work with, it is, what is the agreement? What is the expectation? What are we asking you to do? Explicitly stating it. And then also asking the other person, say it back in your own words so we're on the same page.
That I think is key. Is like I just said to you earlier this morning, is like closing the loop on the explicit communication. Closing it in the sense of there's what you say and what it means to you. Right? Then it has to jump the communication pathway to the receiver. And it's what did they hear and what are they making it mean? Which is fascinating, because when you and I have to shore up, right, when we go through this and we have to shore up, my story and what I made it mean is completely different, usually, than your story. And like you said, that's driven by culture, society, even different learning styles. Like there's so much of what drives that assumption and that interpretation. And that's the biggest piece right there. Because you can be explicit and you can be as clear as you possibly can. Like in your mind, there is no doubt, right? You've laid it all out, but if you don't show up with what did the other person hear and what are they making it mean, you have not finished the cycle.
It's that latter part that I've heard a lot recently. So to your point, the leader thinks they were super clear, but they didn't shore up or close the loop with the other person. They didn't ask them to repeat back, or do you understand? What do you understand? How did you hear me say it? Whatever the question is. And as a little bit of a sidebar, as I've been coaching people, they feel like it's kind of a dickish question. Like one guy said to me, he does to his son, look me in the eyeballs. Did you hear what I said? Okay, say it back to me. And he wasn't able to divorce the way he speaks to his kid to the way he speaks to his colleagues or direct reports. So I do want to highlight, like asking someone to clarify what they heard can be a weird question. It may come out a little more gruff or direct or aggressive than we intend, or condescending. And yet it's imperative to ensure that the other person understands and that you understand that they understand. Mm-hmm. Right? So you make this explicit command, expectation, request, or challenge. You ask the other person to say it back to you to make sure that yes, okay, you do get it.
Right.
That is the biggest missing piece.
Yeah. And that
The other,
takes practice, though.
yes.
Excuse me. Like, that's part of the practice piece, is understanding what's your body language, what's your energy behind it, what's your tone, right? How are you delivering it in the whole sequence? And it's not going to come out perfectly. Well, if it's me, it's going to come out perfectly.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I know. No, I cut you off though. What were you going to say?
No, you're good. You're good.
Well, one thing though, I do want to add to that, speaking from at least my experience, is when somebody is being explicit with you, let's say you're the receiver, and they ask you, what did you hear? What are you making it mean? It is absolutely necessary that you don't shut down and you don't give lip service. Because sometimes some clients the women that I have worked with, they will just nod their heads and be like, yes, I'm totally on board, rather than speak up, clarify, question it themselves, right? They don't want to dissent. They don't want to make it seem like they don't know what you're saying. Or if they're not in agreement, they don't want to speak up and advocate. So I think that is really important as the receiver. Also, like this is not just being explicit, but it's also as the receiver being open to that style of communication and not shutting down.
Let me challenge you a little bit though. Ooh. If I say, do you understand me? And you say yes, that's not ensuring that you understand. I didn't confirm in your words that you heard me correctly, or that we're on the same page, or you received the message as I intended. So if you ask someone, do you understand me? And they say yes, and you're like, all right, great, goodbye. You did not confirm they understand.
This is true. This is true. You have to take the time to ask the exact question. What did you hear me say? What are you making it mean?
Yes.
Yep, this is true.
I think the other part of this, and I think about you and I, right? So we're still relatively newer in partnering in business. We have different work styles, different cadence, different speed, different thought processes, etc. And to speak personally, when you first joined, I was frustrated with you because you weren't on, not fair to say you weren't on. We didn't clarify the expectation. And so I expected you simply to mirror my style. And when you did not, my head was like, what the fuck are you doing? What's taking so long? Why is this not done? Why is it not done to my satisfaction? It was all that unspoken, implicit stuff. And what I can say for my own brain and well-being, etc., is since we've been clarifying what the boundaries are, how long it may take, what our roles and responsibilities are, who's taking what, etc., right? We are minimizing frustration. We're minimizing miscommunication. We're minimizing lost time. We're maximizing output. We're clarifying who's doing what, and things are moving more smoothly. Last point on that is, as we were talking earlier, it's like what is the cost of not having these explicit agreements? And I won't speak for you, but a lot of times what I hear from my clients is it takes too long to explain. It takes too long to coach. It takes too long to allow them to go through the mistakes and learn the thing. I'll just do it myself. Now, doing it myself is a whole other issue. But the main point is, yes, it does take more time to clarify, no doubt. But the whole idea is, do you want to take more time at the front end before you start going down the wrong path? Or do you want to spend all the time on the back end when you got to go all the way back to the beginning and start over?
Right. Exactly. It is worth the time up front. And when you take the time up front, it mitigates so many negative emotions. Like it's the time there. Yes, there's the time piece of it too, but it's also the feeling behind it. And let's be real, like we're humans, we're acting on our feelings. So we're at work and we're frustrated, we're pissed off, we're confused, right? Some of the things we talk about, like you start to have doubt in your team, in your leadership, and finger pointing and blaming. And it's like, and those are the feelings, right? The accumulation of those negative feelings are what erodes your experience at work. It erodes, quite frankly, your relationships at home, your personal relationships. So yes, there's a time involved, but there's also some pain and suffering that comes with it if you don't take the time on the front end. And that's, I mean, at least for you and I, we had to get to that point where we're like, what do we do? Like, hold on. We're on the same team. We're going for the same thing, and we do not want to feel this way in our relationship. So we had to create some tools that we want to share with you. What's your number one tool, right, in creating this explicit agreements in our relationship, which quite frankly is not just our personal relationship, but it's also our working relationship?
Yeah, so a little sidebar is I was introduced to this book. I think it's called The Art of Peace. I think that's what it's called. And, it's a work fable similar to the way Lencioni writes. And one of the main themes was recognizing, quote unquote, is your heart at peace or is your heart at war? And what I was finding sometimes with you, since we're talking about us, is that I would dig into my stance and being right, being closed-minded, not being open to what you were saying or your approach. And so my heart was at war. And then when I would think about it, I was like, that makes zero sense. Why would I be at war with my partner? What is the purpose of this war? What am I trying to win here? And so I do have a post. That's why my eyes are going down here. There is a post that says, is your heart at war or is your heart at peace? So that's the first thing, is recognizing what are my intentions and why. And then two, which is very much tied to this idea of heart at war, you and I have the saying now, which is same team. You mentioned it just a minute ago. And what I've noticed within myself is if I start getting heightened, or if I think you might be, or if something just feels a little off, I will say those words, same team, because I know it's grounding for me. And then when you reciprocate, I'm like, all right, we're back together. We're on the same team. Even though maybe we're a little whatever, annoyed, frustrated, we're same team. Let's figure this out together. So those two things have been really instrumental for me.
Yeah. I would piggyback on that. Definitely is, I think most people, and myself included, right, is we recognize the feeling first. Like there's something happening in the body. Cortisol, right? Like I'm feeling like, like what the fuck? Like, what's going on, right? I start to get a little angry. I shut down, right? You kind of come in and like, you push and go, and I retreat and start to shut down and close off. So number one, I know when I'm doing that, like, so number one, recognizing what's happening in my body. Those are my first signals. Anybody can do that. Number two, what's the story I'm telling myself in my head? And that sometimes it depends on the person, right? Sometimes we have more the analytical brains and they recognize the story first. And sometimes we have the more of the feelers and they recognize the body first. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong, but you gotta capture what's the narrative in your head, because my narrative is like down the road. You and I are broken up. That's it. I'm packing your shit. You're out. Like, we're not doing this anymore. I'm moving to a different country. Like, it goes fast. That I call her Becky, that side of the brain that's left unchecked, the kind of that amygdala, that primitive, like reactive brain. Check what you're telling yourself. And then once I do that, I know, oh, those are the stories that create more separation, that find more evidence for the reason why we're not together on this. But, you're doing this to me. And then going to the R word, right? We joke, we call it the safe word, is same team. So find your word, find your something that's going to create what the brain, we talk about, creating change in the brain. You have to create a pause, and it creates a nanosecond of a pause to regroup. And as you said, what are we trying to accomplish here? Brings you back together. And once you've done that, right? Because what's happening is you elevate. And when you start to do that, you're not in your cognitive thinking brain. You're not in your highest state to be able to critical think and problem solve. You're in a reactionary mode. And once you do that, you can come down enough to say, hold on. This is what I said. This is what I meant. What did you hear me say? What are you making it mean? If you can get that pause, you can go back to that communication pathway, and you can shore up so much confusion. So we said we're going to be 15 minutes. We're exactly 11 minutes long because we like to talk.
We have one more thing, and then let's wrap up. The thing that I've noticed with a lot of my clients with this idea of explicit and implicit is that they work in some instances under assumption. And under the assumption, it is questions that don't have answers. And as you were talking about the amygdala and Becky, it is, as our brains are going, whatever the narrative is, often it is, there's a question that does not have an answer. Your Becky, my Richard, fills in the blank and answers the question with our own creativity. And when I talk to people about this, we all have a good laugh that when we fill in the blank ourselves with Becky or Richard, it is the most extreme, over the top, some sort of suspense movie with the greatest whatever twist and things and bullshit, right? Our brains go way the heck out there.
Yes.
So to your point, when we de-escalate, figure out what are the questions that don't have answers, or what am I making an assumption on, which again is an unanswered question, and then ask the question, we get the answer. And the way I talk about it is invite someone else into the conversation. If the conversation is all in your brain, it is one-sided. And I don't know about you, but I got different voices in my head that play different roles, but it's still one-sided. And as soon as I invite you or someone else, there's a whole different perspective, which is almost always way less dramatic than Richard made it seem.
Almost always.
So very long-winded way to say is recognize the unanswered questions, ask them, get explicit answers and explicit understanding to reduce that uncertainty and reduce the assumption.
Yes. And this works at work, so professionally, and it works really well personally.
Yes.
It's not a single lane, right? It is a great skill across the board. And because we coach leaders, yes, we coach executives, yes, I specialize in women's leadership, right? We cannot separate out your personal life from your professional life. So we speak to both of it. And when you can use this skill in all of your life, things are better. You and I have experienced it personally. Our clients have experienced it. So I think that's really important. So start to practice it wherever it feels safest for you. But do it, start to practice it, start to run experiments on it. And that's the whole philosophy with the Canthal group is we coach to the person. There's not a playbook. Everybody's going to be different, right? And then what we say is we run experiments. And that means that you take the tool that we're coaching you on and you go run the experiment. And then we come back, we analyze it, we revise it, and you relaunch it. So if anybody, we want to put this out there, right? If you're looking for your next coach, we invite you to have a complimentary call with us. You can go to Darren's LinkedIn profile. You can go to mine. We've got a button up there. Make sure, get on our calendars. Let's have a conversation. Or if you just want to leave some comments and talk about your experience with implicit and explicit, if you have questions for us, we want it all. And we'll be back here, not next Tuesday, but in 2 Tuesdays, right?
Yes.
2 Tuesdays. We will be back here with our LinkedIn Live. Any final words, Darren?
Nope. Goodbye.
That never happens. All right, we're done. We'll see you all in a couple weeks.